Hey everyone, it's Dr. Danielle. You're here with Dr. Danielle Onwards with Win-Win Women Network. This is episode 14, and we are here with a very special guest, my friend, Beth Marshall. And today we're going to have a chat focused on the magic of letting go. I am going to be offering, along with Beth, time with us live for Q&A. So if you are here live, hang tight, stay with us for after the show. If not, no worries. You're watching the replay and it's the same good information and it's the same good energy. For those of you who are getting to know me for the first time, I am a business professor, psychic medium, and spiritual teacher. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Beth, hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm great. Hi, I'm so happy to be here, Danielle, and hello to anybody else that's listening. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you. So Beth, who are you? I know it's a loaded question. I chuckle every time I ask my guests that. I'm like, who are you? But see what you can give us.
Yeah, so I could totally go down the existential who am I, rabbit hole, and that would probably take like 5 days to answer that question. Who am I in a worldly sense? Trajectory wise, my professional life began as a CPA and a financial executive, and kind of figured the accounting and finance world would be where I was, and then when I was in my early 30s, I'm in my late 40s now, mid-late 40s, I all of a sudden felt like I was a square peg trying to shove myself in a round hole, and those were the only words that I had at that time. I just knew something wasn't right about, I was at a level of executive that, they were talking to me about partnerships, so on and so forth. And it's just like, yeah, something feels like I don't fit there like I should. I've done everything that I'm quote unquote supposed to do to be successful. And, as the crazy person, I just decided 11 years into a career to move on. I stayed with the firm it was an international accounting firm for another 2 years in an HR and business development role. And then found my way into entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship was really where I started to have like the self-development doors open for me, and starting to challenge a lot of beliefs and thoughts that I had about who I needed to be, so on and so forth. And shortly after that period was when the spiritual awakening started, right?
Okay.
And I started to realize that I'd known things my whole life, but I just thought it was because I worked 70 to 80 hours a week on average in my corporate job. And then I started to realize, I'm like, no, I kind of sense and I know things. So I allowed myself, and I opened the door to, okay, what is this psychic thing? So on and so forth. And I started to realize, like, I could sense, I could see, knowing was my strongest. And I could hear things, and I let that open and blossom, and that just opened a whole bunch of doors. I would say right before that point, I had a breast cancer scare, which thankfully was not that, but that really that began the conversation for me about letting go. Because when you're facing those types of things and you're an entrepreneur and you're like, okay, I'm responsible for my income, but this bomb just exploded over here and I have to wait 3 weeks to see a surgeon and see what this really is, that's where it really started coming up very loudly for me at the end of 2012, and thus the spiritual awakening behind it, so on and so forth. And then, it just continued through there. And I like to joke and say, someday I'll speak from the stage or write a book about how the accountant became a psychic medium, healer, channel, and mystic. Like, how does that happen? I mean, there's a lot of stories in the trajectory of that conversation. And so the way that I speak about my life now, and there's a lot of, we can dive into the details in our conversation if it warrants, but the short version is now I live life as a mystic. It is my primary role to live from the mantra of, and this comes from A Course in Miracles, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to whom? And literally let myself be guided to, whether it's you asking me to be a part of this conversation. Earlier today, I did a training about, creating a holiday budget, right? Like, it's kind of the financial training of things. I have conversations throughout the day with friends, and, did a mediumship reading earlier this week that I hadn't done for a while. And, I'm kind of living life I'm living life on the road. I'm down in North Carolina now, and probably will be moved to another spot in a couple of weeks when I'm complete with where I am, and we'll see where that goes, and literally living and trusting and letting my life be guided. So that's a little bit about the life of a mystic. So that's where I am now.
I need to hear more about this. As you know, one of the many reasons we were attracted to each other is we do have that type A thing, right?
Mhm.
Me fiercer than you. You could on yours, right?
And I've been in similar conversations to ones that you and I have had about what you have going on. So I've
Yeah.
walked it. Yep, I've been there.
Yeah, you've walked it, you understand it. So I find this really, really, really interesting. And before we popped on for this conversation, I did tell you, right, like attracts like. So a lot of my community is similar, right? Type A, left brained, right? They're working up the corporate ladder. Maybe they've burnt out. Maybe they're doing it because society tells them they need to. However, they're not getting that heart, right? That heart-centered feeling. But in business and in law, right? All these left brain fields, we are, I'm not even going to say trained, conditioned. You need to plan. You always need to plan. What are your goals? What's the 5-year plan? What's the 10-year plan? And I find it so beautifully fascinating and inspiring to hear you say that you've been able to walk away in so many areas of your life, not just professionally, from planning. Can you talk more about that? How you were able to go from someone that was very planning focused to letting go, to allowing things to happen and flow with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. Let me see how I want to, or more importantly, what spirit wants to bring through me. The first thing that comes to mind is, when I think back, God, it was over 25 years ago, because it was on my parents' 25th. It was related to my parents' 25th wedding anniversary party that my sister and I threw. And I was still very much in my planner mode. So I was in my early 20s at this point, planner. And whether it was my sister or someone else that said something, I remember that a nickname came through, whether it was something I made up in my mind, but someone basically was like, okay, are we going to have fun at this party, or are we going to strangle the crap out of it? And so the nickname that kind of came through from that was Planner McPlanny Pants. Basically, you're going to strangle the crap out of everything.
Okay.
So I was so hyper, everything needs to be planned down, the entrance needs to be, this needs to be planned, so on and so forth. So I was tightly wound, as the saying would go, very focused on planning. So again, to say that I would be at this place now where I would just let things be revealed to me and not have a plan. What I've learned for myself, and there's a phrase from the Course in Miracles, and I'll never forget the first time I read this 4 or 5 years ago. And it essentially speaks into and says, a healed mind doesn't plan. And I remember even 4 or 5 years ago being like, what do you mean? You gotta have a plan, you gotta have goals. And I had to sit with and every time I read that paragraph, it still hits me. And what it essentially gets into, and to answer your question, how I've been able to evolve, is that I've had to learn to let go. There's another quote also, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit, that basically says, are you willing to let go of who you've become to become who you're truly meant to be?
Yeah, that hits.
Yeah. And so I always thought my life, I did all the things I thought I was quote unquote supposed to do. I was supposed to become an accountant, a partner at an international accounting firm, make lots of money. But what I realized at that point was, I'm like, I am very unfulfilled. So that's really what had me start sitting with why I've done everything everyone has told me to do. Why am I feeling this way? And so I began to peel back the layers of those onions through some personal transformational trainings, and realizing okay, I'm living life from my head instead of from my heart. And so the path then very much became, okay, not that there's anything wrong with my head, but I get to let my mind be used in a peaceful way. I get to allow myself to be guided to the things that I'm here to do, right? Like, why do
Yeah.
I, and I use I as like a little s self, like ego self, why do I think that I have the best idea of what I'm supposed to do when there's something else that wants to be moving through me and wants to be living through me? And so what I've realized in the process of letting go of planning is, there's a graphic from my transformational training, and I use this in a lot of the trainings that I do as well. If you think of, it's going to be kind of counterintuitive, like infinite possibilities as a circle, right? Obviously, infinite is not finite in a circle, but for purposes of a visual, because I am still practical, although I am woo, practical woo. If you think of a circle, there's what we know, right? Which is a very small percentage of all possibilities. It's what's based on past preferences, all those things. Then there's what we know we don't know, right? Another small percentage. So between those two, I know what I know what I don't know. Like, I don't know how to do open heart surgery. I don't know how to fly a plane. Those two things are maybe like 5% of all possibilities. And so 95% plus is, I don't know what I don't know. And so if I'm playing in the realm of the 5%, I'm playing, like, we all hear these catchphrases in the entrepreneurial world, particularly like, don't play small.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm playing in the world of, I'm doing what I know based on past history, I'm playing in a very small realm, considering all the possibilities. And I'm basically blocking out 95% plus of what's possible. And so intellectually, and as an accountant, I can appreciate, oh, okay, I just cut out 95% of magic that could be happening in my life, that could be living its way through me, right? So not that I can't, like when I did a training earlier today, it's more financial based, it's more the old, version of me. And I've sat with spirit, I'm like, why do you still have me doing these trainings? And the answer has been, because you get to bring no judgment and no scarcity to the world of finance, which is very much needed. Right. So to bring a joy and a lightness, like, you're not bad and wrong for not knowing what's going on with your money. And like, let's have a revisit of your holiday budget be about, what do you want to create during the holidays? Right. So it's bringing a different conversation and a different energy to an old paradigm that's wanting to go. Like the paradigms of the world that we get to, like, if you watch the 4 pillars, and spirit speaks to me often about these, like financial, governmental, educational, and healthcare. If you just watch those 4 pillars in the last few years, it's shifting. It's shifting massively. And in my world, I get mostly the conversations about the financial/legal part of it, of what we get to shift, but I get little nuggets about other things as well. So in answering a question about letting go, it's been a step-by-step process of, okay, that's not working. What will work?
Yes.
Like, because I didn't know what would work, because I only knew what I knew.
Yeah.
And if that's not working, then I have no idea what will work. So maybe I just open myself up to, and so it's been a repetitive evidentiary process of me saying, like, oh, okay, when I get out of my own way, and when I'm willing to allow myself to sit in the question of what's possible, what wants to emerge here, I find the most amazing thing. So allowing myself. So at first it was like, I'm going to resist this. Like, I have plenty of stories about, okay, I see all the spiritual stuff developing. That's nice and cute. And I'm going to put that to the side. And like, that was like my 2016, like my world blew apart, because in 2015, the spiritual stuff was coming up strong. I'd done a 1.5 years of deep transformational work. Everything was moving. And so I literally started grabbing onto the lifeboat and saying, like, okay, all you spiritual stuff, you're going to be a cute little snack over on the side. And I'm going to go back to, and 2016 is going to be the year my financial and business oriented business is going to explode. I've invested with all the mentors. And so I've resisted. And so I've learned as much through resistance as I have through, I would say the lessons in the beginning were a lot of resistance. Like, I know what I should do, and that I should not go in that direction. And oh crap, that just blew up. Okay, so maybe not that. And then I started being like, okay, maybe I should just listen and listen. And I allowed myself to be open. And I'm like, okay, that makes me nervous. Like, I've never done it that way. And, like,
When
I've
you
never
say listen, are you listening to spirit? Are you listening to yourself? How How would somebody listening here, who struggles with listening, any guidance on what it feels like, or how you were able to lean into that listening side?
Yeah. So I think for me, the first word that comes to mind when you ask that question is like, how do you tap into that? Is that it gets to be an intentional cultivation. So the good news is that not everybody needs to be a psychic and a medium, yet we all have the ability to tap into those.
Yes.
The trick is we have to quiet our mind enough to be able to tap in. So the first thing that I would say in terms of tapping in is that, and I was just talking with a client about this the other day, if you don't have quiet space in your life, find a way to create it. Now that's going to look different for everybody. That might be meditating in the morning. It might be going on nature walks. It might be listening to music. Like everybody's going to have their thing. And so if you don't have quiet, and because my life is very much the one of a recovering busyaholic and recovering workaholic, right? My life was so jam-packed and so planned that, you know, I'm blessed in the sense that spirit was always there, but I was too busy thinking I knew the best answer and was kind of like pushing that out. But the minute I started to create some quiet space, or it was created for me and by my higher self, then I was able to start hearing more. And so the first step I would say is, what is your way to tune in? And if you don't know, then just start with being quiet for periods, right? Try things out, try and find your thing. Like I have a friend who's very, very clear. She meditates every once in a while, but she's like, my meditation is when I'm walking my dog.
Yeah.
Right? She's very clear. And I'm not a huge meditator right now at this point in my life either. I do, but I sit in quiet. I cultivate quiet, right? Because that's most people, like if you're busy, imagine, and you know this as a medium yourself, like we live in a very dense, heavy world.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we're going and we're vibrating at this lower density vibration and we got a bunch of stuff going on and spirit's vibrating at a higher realm and a faster, quicker, like we're not going to be able to meet in the middle if we're weighing ourselves down with over analyzing and over processing, and there's no quiet time. However, when we cultivate quiet, whatever that means to us, spirit has an opportunity to be like, oh, I can actually like fit something in there, right?
Yeah.
Like I always joke that I get how many people, and if you're listening, like can raise your hand and say you get thoughts in the shower. There's a reason for that. A, water is a conducting force, and B, you're probably not thinking about a lot of stuff. You're just trying to clean yourself, right? or going to the restroom or whatever it is. There's simple things. So I would say cultivate. And in terms of what it looks like, I really try to keep things simple because spirit for me is simple and ego is complex, right? So the key psychic abilities that are possible for people, I think I call them the 4 clairs, and it's clairvoyant, where you just kind of like see a visual picture, right? So for me, sometimes it's I get like it's like a kaleidoscope picture, like in my third eye area, which is kind of like, oh, I got a visual, I got a picture. So that would be clairvoyant. Clairaudient, which I'm not particularly strong in, or don't think I am anyway, is like literally hearing from the outside. It kind of freaked me out at first, so I'm opening more up to it. Mine was always a lead of claircognizance, which is a knowing. That was always my deepest. And then clairsentient is feeling, right? So what am I feeling? And living life now is, for me, it's honoring what my heart is telling me over what may seem worldly and logistically the answer.
Yes, I like that. And in our friendship over the years, I, watching your story, hearing your story, when we have our beautiful catch-ups, from my perspective, from my knowing, Beth, even the worldly tangibles, like there's been some letting go for you. What do you think letting go of things tangible, whether it's a place, whether it's an outfit, right? Whether it's, a certain location, because I know you've been through some shifts lately yourself. How do you think that helps the process of letting go?
Yeah, I think it helps tremendously is the statement that I'll make. That being said, it's not always easy from a humaning perspective, right? Humaning being like a verb that I use to say like, okay, I'm still having a human experience. I may recognize the magnificent multidimensionality that I am and the higher being and presence that I am. And I'm still walking through a human experience in my meat suit. So I think it helps tremendously. That being said, like as humans, we don't always want to easily let things go, right? Like I mentioned earlier, like 4 or 5, I guess 6 years ago now, I didn't want to let my persona as a business professional go. Like what was emerging was kind of like freaking me out. And, you know, for me, it's really become a process of whether it's tangible things or ideas and self-concepts, all of it, every time that I let something go, no matter how big it is, whether it's stuff or, you know, walking away from, you know, having a concrete place to live all the time, right? Like that was big.
That's big.
And, yeah. And allowing
That's
that and
big.
following the guidance that's been coming through for several years of like, okay, you're going to be on the road. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, and sitting with it and simply allowing myself to be open. But every time my point that I want to raise about letting things go and why I think it can be magical is every time I let something go, the phrase nature abhors a vacuum becomes really real for me. And what I mean by that, if you haven't heard that phrase before, is every time I create space, something new has room to move in. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I have a full life and full stuff and every, you know, it's kind of like, for some reason, I'm thinking about like a refrigerator freezer, right? If you've got the entire freezer packed with food, there's no room to put anything new in there. You got to eat something in order to be able to put something new in there. For some reason, they're having me do the visual of a freezer, which I've never used before, but to each their own. I'll trust it that someone gets to hear it that way. And so if I empty out the freezer or halfway empty the freezer, then it allows for, oh, maybe there's a new type of food I should try instead of what I'm used to having in my freezer.
Beth, I know why you have the freezer. So let me explain. So I'm in Tampa, and a few weeks ago, Hurricane Ian came through. And we were without power 4 days. Everything's fine here. No worries here at all. But we were without power. And we had hundreds of dollars worth of food in the freezer, meat and fruits and all sorts of stuff, too much stuff that we had to get rid of. And so there was this piece of me that was looking at the loss, right? This is hundreds of dollars. This is wasted, right? And then the other side of me opened where I was like, you know what, this is an opportunity to reevaluate, to take gratitude for our abundance, right? To reevaluate what things really should be in the freezer, to get more creative with how we're buying and potentially scoping down. And so that's why you got the freezer, because it was a beautiful learning for us. Of course, it was the uncomfortable. Nobody wants to lose something, right? Or the perception of loss, but it was worth it because it really did shift us to say, you know what, we can be lighter, we can be a little bit more, you know, shop with gratitude as opposed to, you know, over purchasing. So I love that. I want to remember to ask you, because you mentioned A Course in Miracles, and I know from our chats, you've taught me a lot about it. For those listening that might not be familiar, can you just tell us a little bit about what Course of Miracles is?
Yeah. So the short ways that I would articulate what it is that first and foremost, you know, if you Google it, some people will read things about like that it's a cult and all these different things. And for me, as an intelligent human being and source being, I could tell you that it couldn't be further from the truth. What I do find it to be is a mind training. It's an opportunity. Like there's 365 lessons there, which is called the workbook. There's also the text, which is kind of like the intellectual part of it. And it's a continual daily reminder to keep my mind focused on love and not fear.
Okay.
Right. And it's to open up and reveal to me over it's been in my life for 10 years. I didn't start actively. It was like one of those books that created or that gathered dust on the shelf for probably like 6 years.
I've have a few.
Yeah. And then in 2018, it was like, I was like doing a book purge and I was like, oh, I'm going to get rid of this. And Spirit was like, no, you're not. Like, now it's time to start doing it. And when I first started reading it, like it gave me a headache. It was confusing. And something about it had me stick with it. But it's essentially an opportunity to what my human has not yet recognized, because my human's living in an egoic, fear-based scarcity world. Like, if we're honest about all the different things that we have going on in our world, there's a lot of fear, and it's coming up because it needs to move on. And we're going to see more of it, and that's okay. But this was an opportunity. It's a course to train my mind to be miracle and love focused. So that would be the shortest version. There's a lot more that I could say about that, but that's the short version of, for anyone that's looking for an opportunity. And it's also sponsored by the Foundation for Inner Peace. So with my number one value being peace, I'm not surprised that my higher self placed that in front of me, because it's really an opportunity for every day for me to be with, okay, the same way that you might rinse your body once a day, I'm going to rinse my mind once a day.
Oh, I like that. Ooh, right? Wow. I feel it and I see that. That's a good one. That's, ooh. So you have many talents. I know I've personally reached out to you for your editing eyes. I know that you also offer mediumship and accounting. Like, I mean, it's just this array, if it feels right to you. And I think that's the important piece too. So those listening, they feel connected to you. You know, how did they reach out to you? What are some projects currently that you're excited about exploring with others?
Yeah. So I'll actually answer your second question first, and then help me remember to go back to the logistics of things. I basically, because of the mantra that I live by, which basically says, like, where am I supposed to go and where do I get to add value and where do I get to give? Like I used the mantra earlier in the show. And so for me, a typical day can look like, earlier today, I did a financial training. Earlier this week, I did a mediumship reading. I have clients that I support with understanding and aligning with the highest version of them. So I do spiritual and transformational coaching. I do other transformational trainings. You know, I just came off of 6 weeks of supporting some friends with watching their dog. And so I got some lessons around, like, one of them ended up having emergency surgery, right? So sometimes my assignments, if you will, look a little wonky, but they're very interesting to say the least. And so it's anywhere, conversations, coaching, training. It's really like, if I have editing and proofreading, if I have a talent, and that comes from being the daughter of an English teacher and reading a lot, right? That just kind of fell in my lap. I didn't go looking for editing and proofreading, but I love it. And so it's pretty much, if something gets put in front of me, unless it's an obvious no, like that's not aligned and I'm not supposed to do that, and I get to say no, I pretty much say yes. So it's amazing. So that's kind of a high level listing of the things that I'm up to and that I'm excited about. And, you know, life with 3 nephews is awesome, and family and all that sort of stuff, and travel. I'm really engaged with that. And in terms of finding me, I keep it simple. I have a Gmail account that's a spiritdrivenlife@gmail.com. And my phone number is 508-728-7842. Anyone can feel free to text, or I usually don't answer calls if I don't recognize the number right away. So you get to use the antiquated service of voicemail if I don't pick up. But yeah, I'm happy to have anyone reach out. I trust that if you're in my space that you're meant to be, and vice versa.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. I have all my notes from you scribbled down here. You're always such a beauty and a wealth of information. I'm sending you love and light, Beth. Thank you so much. To everyone listening, thank you so much for being in our energy, and we look forward to seeing you again for Onwards. Keep in mind, we are here live every Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can get the show access link at drdanielleclark.com, or you can find the show Join Now button on Win Win Women Network. And that is it for now. For those of you listening, just remember, it's the cracks in your heart that let the light shine through. And so it is. Take care, everyone. Bye now.